welcome to another episode in my build log series of the Trumpeter 1:200 scale model of the Titanic. Today I am going to be working on all three decks. So you can see I've got all of my superstructure decks laid out before me. B deck, A deck and the boat deck. In the last episode I finished off the officers' quarters on the boat deck, which pretty much concluded all the deck housing on the boat deck. And I'm now at a point where I want to start finishing off other decks. As long-term viewers of the channel will know, I've gone to quite large lengths to make this superstructure modular. I haven't glued the decks onto each other. I've used bolts and screws instead to hold them together. I've designed the wiring system to be modular, so there's plugs which you can plug in and plug out to take things apart. And the reason for that is because it makes maintenance way easier. If a chair comes loose, or if a person falls over, or if a bulb breaks, it's much easier to get into the nooks and crannies of the model to actually make these repairs as and when they occur, because they will occur. But whilst it is modular, I don't want to be taking it apart and putting it back together all the time, because, you know, the model is getting pretty detailed now. The detail is building, things become more vulnerable as detail increases. So, you know, it is a likelihood that if I keep taking things apart and putting them back together, they are going to sustain damage. So my preference is to have the superstructure as one piece, and I'll keep it as one piece, and I'll only ever take it apart when I really, really need to. So in order to accomplish this, what I need to do is I need to finish off all the little bits of detail on B deck and A deck. So that's things like adding people onto the promenades, adding signage, you know, the signs above the door saying first class entrance and that kind of thing. I need to add benches, I'll need to add the cranes at the back of A deck, I'll need to do the railings, that sort of stuff. All the detail that needs to be done on B deck and A deck to complete them fully. And then, once that's done, I can put them all together and the superstructure on A deck and B deck at least is finished. Boat deck, of course, I don't need to worry about because I have access to that all the time anyway because it's the top deck. So, over the course of today's video, I'm going to be adding detail to A and B deck. Not sure I'll finish it all today because there's a fair bit to do, but we'll see how we go. So, without any further ado, let's crack on!
Right, I'm just going to show you how I do the benches, and we're going to start off with one of the smaller ones. So these are the slightly sort of half-size benches, which just have two sides on them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the forming mandrel, and I pinch the wooden slats right at the base, like that, with my thumb. Then, using a circular tool, in this case just the smooth end of a microfile, I roll up the forming mandrel, and that gives me most of the shape, but as you can see, not quite all of the shape. I haven't quite squashed it far enough in where your bum goes. So, get a bit of craft knife and just squash it in, and then roll it up, and that's the forming complete. And there you see we have a nicely formed wooden part of the bench. Now it's just a case of dipping the end in a bit of glue, lining it up, and placing it down onto one of those sides like that. Then we'll allow that to dry, and then we'll do the other one. So here's one I've done earlier, you see, and we've already got one of the sides on. So all I'm going to do with this is dip the other side of the bench into some glue, and then drop it down. And there we have it, a bench, all finished. So, first, much like with the smaller benches, I'm going to get the piece and aim it just at the bottom of the former. Pinch it with the thumb and then roll to form, and then just make sure it's nicely tucked into the bottom area. And there you go. Got a nicely formed bit of wood. So now what we'll do is dip the end of the wood in some glue, and then place the bench down on top like that. What I'll do now is I'll give that a chance to dry. Right, I think this bench is probably dry enough now. So what I'm going to do is pick it up once again, and this time put the other side of the bench into some glue. And then place it down like that. And I'll just leave that to dry. Now the final little bit is to get this support into that part of the bench. So what we need to do is get some glue and then put it on like that. So that's what I'm going to do now. So I'm just dipping it in a little pool of glue I've made. And there we go. And there we have one finished bench. And there's my little finger for scale. These are tiny. So as you can see, I've built up quite a large stock of benches now. I've got all the large and then also some small over here. And I'm just going to I think I'll call it a day there. And I'll fit these to the model, and then if I run out, I've got a few spare ones on the PE fret that I can use later if needs be. And for me, this is a really good application for photo etch, because you know it looks like a genuine bench in miniature. It's brilliant, and this is the best of photo etch for me. You know, it allows you to get the detail on the slats. It gets that lovely wrought iron work on the sides. It just looks fantastic. So big thumbs up for photo etch there. So I'm now going to move on and have a look at a few other things that I need to do. Right, just going to show you how to do one of these dastardly fiddly handrails. As you can see, I've got a few drying there. What I tend to do is pop a bit of blue tack next to where it needs to go and get one of said handrails. Just sort of push it up against the blue tack so that it holds it in place. Arrange it correctly, and you need a really fine glue spreader for this. It really doesn't need to be big at all. The less glue the better. Just daub a tiny bit of glue onto the end like that, and that should be sufficient to hold it. Now I'm going to go back to one of the ones I've done earlier. So this one, I have glued it at this end and the blue tack is still holding it at the other end. So I'll just take the blue tack off, make sure it's aligned as I want it. It's fine. And then I'm just going to do exactly the same thing I did, but on the other end. There we go, and that's enough. Now we just let that dry of its own accord. And that's how you do those. Now, the other thing that I want to add to these decks is deck chairs. As you can see from this photo, Titanic would have had hundreds, literally hundreds of deck chairs all over her decks for the use of passengers so they can get sun, so they can sit down somewhere, whatever. As you can see from the photo, many of them would have been stored folded up, and I've just folded up one of these for a bit of an experiment. So a lot of them would have been stored folded up, and you can see that they're all stacked up against the walls. Now, unfortunately, the KA set, this looks like quite a lot, but it doesn't really give you that many deck chairs. So I have ordered some more from Tom's Modelworks, which will be coming soon. But for the meantime, I'm going to fold up all of these and use them to decorate a deck, and all the stuff from Tom's Modelworks will end up on the boat deck. So that's what we're going to do now. And in a remarkably fast spate of delivery, the stuff from Tom's Modelworks has already arrived. So I bought 2 sets like this, which is deck chairs unfolded for people to sit on. So I think each set has about, let's see, 6 times 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So each set has 42, and then I've also bought 1 set of folded up deck chairs. So these will complement the KA set, which I'm gonna fold up all of these. So that gives me around 200 deck chairs in total to play with, which might not be quite as many as there were on Titanic, but it's enough to give the impression. It's enough to give the effect. So I'll be using these as well. Now, as you've seen throughout this video, I've been painting quite a lot of figures, and that's because I need quite a lot to adorn the decks that I'm going to be covering in a second. So that's B deck promenade and A deck promenade. Now these were exclusively first and second class spaces, so I've only been painting first and second class people. So for the first and second class men, almost exclusively in suits of various different colours, and as far as painting anything in this scale is simple, this is about as simple as it gets. You pretty much paint the entire figure in a flat colour, grey, dark green, brown, black maybe, and then just do a sort of V at the neck to show where the jacket buttons up. Then a little bit of flesh tone on the hands and face and some hair on top, maybe paint the shoes black as well. But as far as it goes in this scale, and bear in mind, look at my little finger next to these people, they're pretty small. This is about as easy as the painting gets. I've also done a few stewards, because there would have been stewards popping around attending to people, so I've done a few of those. I've got a few officers as well, because a few officers would have been zooming around on their duties, etc. And of course I've also got some ladies in the fashion of the time as well. So, exclusively been painting first class people now. I've probably got about 100 figures in total, and that should be enough for my decks. And then I need to start painting. I'll need to do some more first class people, and then I'll need to start doing some third class as well. I've also painted the ship's band, and I'm having a think about where to put them. I really would like to include them because they're such a sort of famous part of the story of the ship, you know. And initially I had thought about putting them on the inside the grand staircase on the boat deck, but I just think that's not going to be visible enough. So my latest thought is putting them just outside the veranda and palm courts and the aft end of A deck. And I think that's probably going to be a little bit inaccurate, because I would be very surprised if the band did any sort of playing outside at all, particularly in an April crossing. But interested to know what people's thoughts on that are. So I've now made up a few different deck chairs. I've made a couple in a sort of deployed seating / lying position. And I've also done a few folded up. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue these onto the promenade deck just to sort of get an idea of what they look like. So you can see what I'm doing here is I'm just sticking them down onto the walls. And the reason I'm doing the walls rather than the floor is because it just protects them a little bit more when I come to sort of move things around, which I will do every so often. I'm being relatively generous with glue here. And that's because my preference is to have more glue and a better bond than to have these things sort of coming loose sporadically. So that's the logic. So there we go. Now another thing that you quite often saw were deck chairs sort of stacked up in lines. So that's another thing I'm going to try to recreate. So what I'm going to do is just sort of daub a bit of glue onto one and then just place another one on top. Like so. And we can sort of build up a stack and then put them onto the wall. Make it look like they've got lots of deck chairs stored on an area of the deck. Now, I imagine a few of you are looking at that and going, well, that looks horrible. It looks like a maelstrom of legs and stuff, matchsticks. And yeah, it does. But what do you think a real stack of deck chairs would look like? What I'm trying to convey here is this is an area where people are just folding them up, chucking them in, because the next day they're going to be taken out and they're going to be redeployed elsewhere on the ship. So I want sort of slightly uneven stacks, deck chairs just sort of, you know, put there with reasonable care, but, you know, placed there out the way, not in the way of the passengers, ready for the next day's use. And I think that's what this sort of portrays quite nicely, really. So there we go. That seems like a reasonably obvious place to stop for the day. Made a good start. You can just see some examples of deck chairs there. Note again, the decks aren't quite fully seated yet, but you can see some deck chairs just sitting around. And as I say, this seems like a logical place to stop. There's a lot more to go before these decks can be fully sealed up. Lots of people need to be walking down these promenades. We need a lot more deck chairs. We need some cranes here, but we're getting there. So that's it for today's video. If you have any more questions or comments, please pop them down below and I'll do my absolute best to get back to you. If you've enjoyed this, please do like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye for now.